questions. I hope many of you will be all too familiar with this way of working now, which is that unless you're speaking, please mute yourself. There will be two question and answer sessions to provide you with plenty of opportunity to ask questions. And you can do that if you're on MS Teams, raising the yellow hand icon and or waving at me if you're visible, and or just shouting. And we'll get the old-fashioned way, and we'll get to you, I promise. I'm going to introduce formally my board members. I'm not going to ask them to introduce themselves. So from the executive side on the board, we have Tracy Allen, our Chief Executive, Chris Sands, the Deputy Chief Executive and Finance Director, William Jones, Chief Operating Officer, Darren Tidmarsh, our Director of People and Organisational Effectiveness. Welcome, Darren, to your first AMM in DCHS. Michelle Bateman, Chief Nurse and Director of Nursing, Allied Health Professions and Quality. Ben Pearson, our Medical Director, and Melanie Curd, our Associate Director of Corporate Governance. From our non-executive side of the board, we have Julie Holder, Kay Fawcett, Ian Litchfield, Richard Harcourt, and Joy Hollister. Apologies we have from Jim Austin, Chief Information Transformation Officer, Tim, who's one of our executive directors, Tim Broadley, Kay Burnett, and James Riley, who are both non-executive directors. We've had and seen some changes during the course of 1920. Those who've left us: Amanda Rawlings, Director of People and Organisational Effectiveness, left in February 2020, Rick Meredith in April 2019, and Kirstine Farrer in August 2019. To all those colleagues, thank you very much for your contributions to DCHS, and those who've replaced them, Darren, Ben, and Mel, in turn, welcome to you all. Okay, just a reminder, I've been told on my notes here that we have a Twitter feed going, so the hashtag DCHSAMM. If you're a Twitter person, please feel free to post. I shall try and concentrate on chairing the meeting rather than posting. I'm sure Rob will do that on my behalf. Just a few words of introduction from me then. This is my 7th year as a chairman of this outstanding, fantastic trust, where we've made great progress, both internally and as a health and care system, changing the way we do things, improving the way we care for people all the time. There's been a relentless focus on person-centered care. We call this the notion of what matters to individuals, and that person-centeredness is something that permeates throughout the organization. We use it not only with our patients and what matters to them, but also with our colleagues and staff. We've worked hard in a joined up way across Derbyshire, across organizational boundaries. And I say this every year, and I'm going to say it again, because I absolutely continue to be humbled by the immense dedication, commitment, and incredible dedication of our staff, really. They are the 4,500 plus staff, rather, should I say, are the true embodiment of the DCHS way. And for all of those staff who provide great, compassionate and caring care to our patients and those working behind the scenes, as it were, a huge thank you to you from me as the chair and from the rest of the board as a whole. So today, what we'll do is we'll demonstrate an account. This is a really important event in the calendar of DCHS, where we take the opportunity to account to you, to our members of our public and our staff and our governors, as an NHS body, about what happened during 1920 and how we delivered our statutory obligations. We will have the opportunity to pause, reflect, and acknowledge those fantastic contributions from the staff that I mentioned earlier. We'll hear, as a first part of the session, a really interesting session led by our public health specialist around how we're helping children lead better lives in Derbyshire. Really important topic that we give it due attention, and also report to you on the achievements against quality, performance and finance indicators during 1920. We will hear from our lead governor, Bernard Thorpe, who will present his take on working with us in the organisation. And we'll also hear from Tracy Allen, our chief executive, who will give her perspective on not only the past year, but also how looking ahead 2021 is shaping up. So without further ado, I think we are ready to move on to our first session, and which is gives me great pleasure to invite two leaders, Jane Needham from our organisation, who's consultant public health, got a title on the screen there. I won't go through the very long title, but also Dean Wallace, Director of Public Health in our partner organisation, Derbyshire County Council, to focus on improving children's lives in Derbyshire. Over to you, Jane and Dean.
Thank you very much, Prem. And I'm just double checking, Dean, I can see your name on the call. I just want to make sure that you're there.
Yeah, I'm here, Jane.
Marvellous, thank you. So it's over to me first. So afternoon, everybody. It's great and daunting in equal measures. I keep seeing the numbers on that number counter churning up. There's so many people on the call today. Dean and I have 30 minutes, and the ask on us was to describe the work that our two organisations have been doing to move away from a traditional tendering arrangement and instead work towards a contractual relationship called a Section 75 agreement, which we've done to strengthen and foster our partnership working between the two organisations, but also the voluntary sector and local communities. So this approach allows us to think about the needs of children and young people with the sole purpose of improving their health as a population group. So that's why we've titled this up as a Population Health Management for Children's Services. So I'll probably just start off that the most recent United Nations policy briefing on the impact of the COVID pandemic, it opens with a line that says, children are not the face of the pandemic, but they risk being amongst its biggest victims, and the impact to them risks being lifelong. So I thought it would be useful to just set the context of who this population group are. It's crucially important to hold in our minds just how many children there are in Derbyshire, because only once we really appreciate the numbers that you can see up there on the slide, and where the levels of need are, that we can shape our services to support those children, young people and the families around them. So the evidence shows that the most important time to make a positive impact in a child's life is in the first 1001 days. The contacts we make as a service towards those families are weighted more towards those early days, because that's where the potential for the best start occurs. But we continue to provide support to families right through to the young person reaching 19. And those first 1001 days are essential in giving us the chance to reduce the health inequalities which so sadly exist in our society. So the figure I'd probably draw your attention to on this slide is that people under the age of 20 make up 21% of our Derbyshire population. So our staff in our 0 to 19 services are supporting at least 21% of the population, plus the parents and carers that surround each child. So when you consider the vast numbers that they're providing care and support to, it shines a light on just how hard this team of staff work and why what they do is so vitally important to us. So over to you, a bit of a quick quiz question here. So thought it would be useful to just run through a couple of queries about children, and hopefully there might be a few surprises in there for you. So I'm hoping everyone can see the questions. So the first one is, how many children in Derbyshire live in poverty? I'm not going to put anyone on the spot. 23,000 is the answer. So that's the most recent statistic, and it relates to the 1920 data. So in our most deprived area, which is Bolsover, 1 in every 5 children live in poverty. And even in our most affluent area, it's still 1 in 10. So if we try to visualise an average class in an average school, it's highly likely there'll be at least 2 or 3 children in each class whose family circumstances mean that basic things such as food, heating and clothing are really hard to come by. And those children are probably sitting quietly and quite hungrily trying to hide this problem. So how many young people aged 10 to 24 were admitted to hospital due to self-harm in 17-18? So that's the most recent year we've got for that statistic. And Derbyshire is statistically significantly worse compared to England. There were 700 people aged 10 to 24 who were admitted during that year for self-harm. And if we were in line with England, So if we had the same admission rate as England, there would have been 154 fewer young people admitted. And if we were the best in England, there would have been 627 fewer young people admitted for that statistic. What percentage of Derbyshire's reception children are overweight or obese? So I think this is one that probably most people would become familiar with now. So in Derbyshire, 24% of reception children are classed as overweight or obese, and we're statistically significantly worse on this indicator too. It's not exactly a joy reading this one. Really importantly, evidence tells us that children who are overweight or obese are more likely to have parents who are also overweight or obese. And the most recent health survey for England results show us that 48% of mums and 54% of dads whose child is classed as obese feel that their child is either too light or about the right weight. And the common factor, so moving on to question number 4, the common factor identified in over 50% of social care assessments for children in need is domestic violence. And it's something that, as I move through the presentation, we'll be able to talk about the impact that that's having within Derbyshire now. And then a statistic that always brings a shudder to me is the Office of National Statistics tell us that the commonest age of a murder victim is a male child aged 0 to 2 years. So what we'd want to do now is if we could just use the chat function to the side, so hopefully most people will have access to that. Would people mind just dropping into the chat function the words that they would use to describe how they think Derbyshire families that we're supporting right now could be feeling? Just single words would be great. And it's just so that we really start to think about what it must be like for those children. Yeah, anxious. Stressed, worried, nervous. Thanks such a lot for putting all those through. Yeah, so they're really starting. Please keep them coming.
Alone.
Really, thank you. Alone came through loud and clear there. Isolated, confused, concerned, depressed, lonely, scared, isolated. So if we move on to just the next slide. So consider, I wouldn't ask people necessarily to put this up unless they're feeling really comfortable. But now have a think about what words you'd use to describe how your own families and children could be feeling right now. So the reason for just asking the 2 questions is that quite often when we talk about families, children's patients who we care about, we think about them as a group over there, and we think about ourselves as separate to them. But actually what I'm watching coming up loud and clear through on that chat, yeah, glum from Tracy there, is that there is so many similarities between how we are feeling right now. And actually that commonality brings us all together. Yeah, some really, really sad and uncertain stories coming through there. So these are really real issues, and they're affecting so many of us right now. Tired from Helen, yes. Yeah. So I think for me, the real pull me up factor of this exercise, when I've considered it and run it through with a few other people, is that actually what must it feel like to be a member of staff right now whose fundamental job is to deal with families for whom all of those emotions are going on, and then go home and find that those emotions are also very, very real to you right now. And that's going to be happening for health visitors, our school nursing, our social care and our education staff right now, day in, day out. And so it feels very right at this point that we should acknowledge this and say a very simple and heartfelt thank you to that group of staff. So on to the next slide. So having in mind about the numbers that I've just talked about, the stats and the emotive words, it's important to think about why population health approach is so important. So population health management means considering the needs of the whole population, and what issues sit at the root of those needs and how we can respond. So consistently evidence shows specific factors we experience early in our lives have the biggest negative impact on us. They're called adverse childhood events or experiences. And we're just going to run a short video clip because it simply and powerfully illustrates what they are. It's 4 minutes. I'd ask you to really bear with it. It will pass quicker than that. And we've borrowed it with pride from NHS Scotland, but it doesn't matter, it's got a Scottish flavour, it is equally as relevant to us here in Derbyshire. And the statistics tell us that those children who experience 4 or more ACEs in their lives go on to be 3 times more likely to have lung disease or be adult smokers, 11 times more likely to participate in illegal drug use, 2 times the level of liver disease. I could go on and on. But for those children who experience 6 or more ACEs in their lives, the stats tell us that they are likely to die 20 years earlier than the average person.
Did you know that what happens to me as a child has a huge impact on the rest of my life? Some children grow up in a supportive, happy environment where positive relationships can make them feel safe. Others grow up facing difficulties which can have a long-lasting negative impact, even affecting what kind of adult they'll become and what health conditions they'll have in the future. These stressful events in childhood are called adverse childhood experiences, known as ACEs. ACEs was first identified in America after a study found that the number of stressful events as a child increased, so did the risk of experiencing a range of health conditions when you're grown up. These stressful experiences in childhood include different forms of abuse, physical or emotional neglect, and things that can happen to your family, like domestic violence, adults with alcohol or drug problems, parents splitting up, having a mum or dad with a mental illness, or having someone from the house in prison. But how does this affect me when I grow up? Well, the more ACEs I have now, the more risk I'll be affected when I'm an adult. If I have 4 or more ACEs, I'm more likely as an adult to suffer from heart disease, develop type 2 diabetes, be in prison, have committed violence, or do things that are bad for my health, like smoking, drinking, and taking drugs. There are also other things which can have similar long-lasting effects on my health, such as bullying, losing a parent, not having a home, and being poor. In Scotland, 260,000 children are living in relative poverty, and out of those, 7 out of 10 children living in poverty are in families where at least one adult is working. If you're grown up, not all work is good for your health, and being in work doesn't always mean you're not poor. A study in England found that people who have experienced 4 or more ACEs were 3 times more likely to live in the most deprived areas. So inequalities matter. Please help me and others like me. There are things you can do to help prevent ACEs. Talk about them. The more people know about ACEs, the more they can think about them in everything they do. If you work with children, have a think about whether they are experiencing an ACE and what impact it might have on them. Chances are you might have experienced an ACE, maybe more than one. What impact has it had on your life? Was there anyone you could speak to about it? Research has said that having an adult that you can trust and speak to could help stop the negative effects of ACEs. If you work with grown-ups in services such as homelessness, addiction, or prison services, think about the impact of ACEs on them and what impact it might have on their children or kids they might have in the future. If you work in a school, think about how your work can help support children experiencing ACEs and what can be done to prevent them. Are there other people outside your own work that can help us combat ACEs? Can you work with other people to help prevent them? Please help Scotland be the best place to grow up. People like me shouldn't have to suffer, so what are you going to do about it?
So a really powerful video there. And what it really clearly demonstrates to us is that ACEs, we're not left in any doubt that ACEs and the impact of reducing the impact on a child's life as early as possible is really important. And as brilliant as they are, if our colleagues who work into our health visiting and school nursing teams focused only on traditional medical care, the impact would be minimal. So ACEs isn't about routine NHS hospital healthcare, it's about income, employment, education, role models. So if we think about what ACEs meant for us in terms of tendering, so I've put up a slide here, the good old days. Anybody who's gone through this with me will know that there's a degree of tongue-in-cheek around this. So Dean, who's our Director of Public Health teams had a national mandate to go out to competitive tender for Children's Public Health Nursing Service. They had no choice in that matter at all. The specification was written by the Commissioner. Providers had a limited time frame to make what in effect was a sales pitch, which were NHS staff, we're not marketing staff. And then the tender was awarded by the Commissioner for a specified amount of time and against the published specification. And once the specification's been written, it's incredibly difficult to change it. And once it's been awarded, even more so. So there's limited ability for the Commissioner or provider to change anything, even if something isn't working or the population health needs change. So what does that mean in terms of a brave new world and what difference around a different contracting approach? So we just wanted to show a short video clip which we think gives a great explanation between the old and new ways of working. So hopefully, Rachel, I think this should play now. So now is just probably exactly the right time for me to hand over to a gentleman who's had quite a bit on his hands in the last few months. So Dean Wallace, as I've said earlier, is our Derbyshire Director of Public Health, and I'm hoping, Dean, if you could just give us a couple of minutes of reflections on how this different way of working's felt for yourself.
Thanks, Jane, and thanks for inviting me. It's nice to be talking about something that's not COVID-19 for 5 minutes or so at least. Anyway, so thanks for inviting me. I guess as Jane has shown earlier, we know that what makes us healthy and well is far more than healthcare and NHS delivery. We know healthcare is around 20% of our health and well-being, and the other 80% revolves around our education, our income, So our jobs, our employment opportunities, the places we live, access to green space, all these sort of things that make a good childhood and allow us to grow into adults who have good career opportunities and prospects. And we know that the life chances fall unequally across Derbyshire as they do elsewhere, and COVID-19 has ripped open the inequalities across the country, and Derbyshire is no different in relation to that. Prior to all that, we recognise an issue with health inequalities, and also that on our own, either councils or the NHS or other partners can only do so much, but by working together, we can do so much more. And if we can remove some of the barriers around contracting and competition, and just get on with collaboration and delivery and a focus on outcomes, then even in a tough financial environment, we can potentially still do some really good stuff and try and move outcomes on. So a Section 75 agreement, I guess it's just another way of doing a contracting arrangement. So that in itself is just a tool. I guess what's most important are the relationships and the trust that we've built up between County Council, Public Health Department, DCHS and Children's Services and the County Council as sort of the key three players within this arrangement that we're in place. And then we've also got now great involvement from clinical commissioning group partners from Derby, from NHS Derby and Derbyshire Clinical Commissioning Group. So we've got a real breadth of experience across the children's agenda, from the social care elements, from 0 to 19, public health nursing, from the broader social determinants of health. We're trying to bring all these arrangements together and work in a much more joined up way. So breaking down silos, working on what's important to our young people and where we need to prioritise our efforts, and removing some of the anxiety from staff who are worried about TUPE transfers and what organisations they're working for, and all those factors which are on one level come secondary to delivering outcomes, but equally, if we don't look after the people delivering the services and take that into account, then we have to think about how that impacts on the work and what they achieve and what they deliver. So this is really important, and this is a stepping stone to do even more and integrate more between I think local authorities and the NHS. So I'm sure people are aware that back in 2013, public health moved from NHS to local government, and whatever people feel about that move, there's a real opportunity by working together that we'll join all this up, and it needs both. It's not either or. We need to have this everywhere in a real joined up approach, and this is a great example of what can be done with some effort, belief and trust in each other in delivering. And I can see James popped up, so at that point I'll take my cue and shut up.
See how that see how smooth the working's got there. Thank you a lot, Dean. So just what we wanted to do was to round up, was to just say about the so what factor. So how are we doing as a result of this different way of working, and also what impacts the pandemic made. So how are we doing? So our children's services are amongst the best services in the country for delivering against the healthy child outcomes, which are those early, really core interventions that we need to make to give the child the best start. And throughout the pandemic, our staff have continued to ensure every family's had vital contact and support both prior to and just after every birth that's occurred during these last 6 months. They've also ensured that all the children who had safeguarding needs, they're our most vulnerable children and families, irrespective of the age of that child, have continued to get the essential support and contact throughout. The service was voted DCHS Clinical Team of the Year at our most recent Extra Mile Awards, and thoroughly well deserved. And true to Dean's word, Derbyshire County Council have reinvested back into the school nursing element of our services because of the recognition of just how important the emotional and physical health of school-aged children is. And that was before the impact of COVID and the school closures has even been taken into account. So the Section 75 work allowed us to hear from frontline staff who reported feeling more invested in the way they deliver the services because they've helped to design and write the service specification. And to date, I'm still not aware of any other service, certainly in our region and across the country, where frontline children's public health staff of all grades and all areas of responsibility could sit alongside commissioners in meetings over a number of months and write the service specification and set the performance outcomes they were prepared to be held accountable for. And that's a seismic shift in contractual working relationships, and one in Derbyshire I think we should feel really proud of. So then if we look at pre-COVID, so pre-COVID staff carried out an average of around 3,000 visits a month. Children risk becoming invisible when lockdown arrived, but staff have maintained those essential antenatal and birth visits alongside all the safeguarding work, and we've never dipped below 66% of normal activity throughout the whole of the pandemic time. So restoration is fully underway. Staff have been absolutely fantastic at returning us to being a truly universal service. And I'd like to thank the execs for the support they gave us, because DCHS chose to make sure children and families remain safe and supported, and less than 1% of our qualified health visiting and school nursing staff were redeployed during the pandemic. So we did redeploy some staff, but we protected our qualified. So we have a single point of access in our service, and the Section 75 arrangements just allowed us to really quickly shift how that single point of access worked. So you'll see the numbers there. We've gone from 200 calls per week pre-COVID to 800 plus calls now. So the call handling service previously dealt with queries mainly for 0 to 5-year-olds, and they were quite administrative based queries, appointment times, changes, etc. Now parents of children of all ages through to 19 can seek advice from trained clinicians. Their calls are coming through about continence, emotional health, infant feeding, physical well-being, sleep, the impact of school lockdown, social isolation. So our service pre-COVID, we achieved 11.5% better in terms of the Healthy Child Programme contacts compared to the England average, and 8.2% better than East Midlands. And as I've just referred to there, our services continue to operate, prioritising contacts with new babies and with those children under safeguarding needs. If we think about domestic violence, so pre-COVID, domestic violence and postnatal depression were always the key issues, and those were always things that came through from the service reports telling us what troubles families were experiencing. But frighteningly, during COVID, requests for support for domestic violence have increased by 42% and for postnatal depression by 30%. And that's just indicative of the social issues which the pressures of lockdown have created for children and families. So if we then think about breastfeeding, I think is the next slide. So I'll carry on talking. So the next slide, what it's showing is that pre-COVID, our breastfeeding prevalence and sustainment rates, 43 and 77, and during COVID, 43 and 77. So that's comparing 6 months of last year to the first 6 months of this year. And despite all the challenges of lockdown, our data tells us that that's an amazing job that our staff are doing, because to be able to support mums to give the babies the best start in life, and we've seen no shift in those rates. And considering that new mums were worried about letting staff into homes at the start, or the difficulty of providing breastfeeding support over the phone, just is absolute testament that we've managed to sustain, the staff have managed to sustain those rates. But 0 to 19 isn't only about, children's services isn't only about 0 to 19 services. So we have school age gyms in there, we have continence in there. Our school age gyms team, 15 whole-time equivalent delivery staff, deliver about 140,000 vaccines across 559 schools each year. That is massive. And in this summer with the school lockdown, in response to the school closures, the school age immunisation service set up the first drive-through service in the country and delivered 10,000 HPV vaccines to young people, irrespective of the weather. And then finally, I just want to flag for our children's continence team a bit of fingers crossing going on, because they've been nominated as finalists in 3 categories of the National Nursing Times Award this year for the amazing work that they do to support children and families where continence is an issue. It's fundamentally important because of the impact it can have on a child's school readiness and their emotional well-being. So the very last thing we want to do before we take questions is just run a short clip where families and staff have reflected on their last 6 months, and I really hope this runs smoothly. If not, we'll absolutely make sure that you get a copy of this. I'd just say get a tissue ready.
If you ever find yourself stuck in the middle of the sea, I'll sail the world to find you. If you ever find yourself lost in the dark and you can't see, I'll be the light to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, ooh, yeah, yeah. If you're tossing and you're turning and you just can't fall asleep, I'll sing a song beside you. And if you ever forget how much you really mean to me, every day I will remind you. Oh, find out what we're made of. We are called to help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you like 4, 3, 2, and you'll be there. 'Cause that's what friends are supposed to do, oh yeah. Ooh, yeah, yeah. You'll always have my shoulder when you cry. I'll never let go, never say goodbye. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can count on you.
So that really brings us to the end of this section of the annual members meeting, and I just want to conclude by just thanking our staff for being simply fantastic, the Derbyshire County Council for being willing to hear us out on the Section 75 proposal. It's been fantastic entering into this different way of working. And I just also want to make a bit of a recognition of someone who's done a fantastic job on pulling this presentation together for us. So Rachel, you know who you are, and thank you very much.
That's what we would normally do, Jane and Dean, if we were in a room, but thank you so much for that heartfelt and heart rendering. You started off the presentation with so many words on the meeting chat about despair and fear and worries, and I've just posted a word on there which I think you've ended up with the word that comes to my mind certainly as hope. And what we've seen on this journey, it's amazing, isn't it, that where we started off, it's not been easy, I know, and I commend the work you and Dean and colleagues and all the staff in this service have done. Where we were, I remember talking about efficiencies required, and we were talking about school nursing, and we were talking about, you know, potential reductions in that field, and yet now you're reporting a potential investment. And that just shows to me that actually, if health and care systems were to put aside all that transactional behavior of how we spend our money, which takes so much energy and time, and I'm afraid still does in other quarters, then we focus the very scarce resources we have on improving services. So well done to you all, and thank you to all of our staff who've embraced this with immense grace, and I do believe there is a lot of hope going forward. There are going to be a lot of challenges now with COVID and further issues of poverty, deprivation and challenges and difficulties, and children with education impacted. I'm sure we'll have some questions about that. So let's, colleagues, open it up for questions. Let me see if I can see any yellow hands or not. Anybody who wants, oh, and lower my hand, by the way. Anybody have?
Michelle has a hand up, Prem.
Oh, hi, Michelle.
Hi, Jane. Thank you for that. That was an awesome presentation. Really, really good and very informative as well. Thank you. My question, I was talking with a colleague quite recently about dental health care for young children at this time, because we do know that dental services, I know it's not within our remit, but how can we influence a different response to dental care for young people who are not currently, receiving that?
Yeah, so I'll make a start on that. I might also look to Jill Levick, who's on the call, to help me out with this. But if I give first thoughts, and I know Dean's also got strong views, so oral health promotion is something that Derbyshire hasn't always had the best outcomes for. Currently, it's not an outlier for us on the public health outcomes framework, but it has in the past. And in particular, we've got dentists who are shut for or closed for what we would class as very routine care. I know certainly that's an issue for us. So Dean does commission from us an oral health promotion service. It's a fairly small service and it sits within our children's team. And Dean has committed to look to strengthen that service over the coming months, I think in recognition of the oral health promotion needs of our communities. So Dean, Jill, I'm just not sure if there's anything else either of you would want to add to that.
Do you want me to just come in, Jane? It's Jill Levick here.
That'd be brilliant, Jill, thank you.
Yes, at the moment, dental caries is obviously a significant concern. However, every contact that our health visitors and school nurses and support staff have with families, dental care is discussed. In addition, we distribute toothbrushing packs with our oral health promotion team at the moment to what are classed as vulnerable 2-year-olds at the 2-year contact. But I'm in discussion at the moment with Maddie, only yesterday, providing her with the information about the numbers of 2-year-olds we've got across the county, because we are looking to deliver toothbrushing packs to every 2-year-old, recognising now, certainly since COVID, families that we considered were universal before are not universal now for all the concerns that were raised on the call is just, and all the anxieties. And to have a toothbrushing pack to everybody, it's a source of conversation, and also you're providing something tangible for them to actually go away with and start. I mean, obviously toothbrushing starts earlier, but it's just that reinforcement at 2. Does that answer your question a bit?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jill.
Thanks, Jill. I can't see any hands up. Oh, Bernard, I think. Bernard, welcome from Devon or wherever you're calling from.
Yeah, Devon. Yes, thank you, Prem. Yes, thank you, Jane. I thought that your presentation, everything was wonderful, and it's a lovely example for me of collaborative working, and the outputs speak for themselves. But what were the causes of success in the earlier days when you actually first came together from a different place to work collaboratively? What were the causes of that success?
Oh, that's a really good question. So if I give my view and then it'd be really interesting to hear from Dean. So I think a real desire on both parts because you sit and watch the impact of tendering on staff. And as Dean said, the well-being of staff is so fundamentally important to how they are then able to care outside into the community. We've got to put our staff first, and tendering is just not a healthy process for staff to have to go through, and that's why it felt really important to try and work together to get a different relationship. And I know that I'm hopeful that there's quite a few children's services staff on, so I don't want to in any way detract from the Section 75 and get into a new place, and the work we had to go through was not easy either. However, the position that we're in now, where we've got a Section 75, COVID has absolutely demonstrated how we can flex things differently. That's really important. So I think an observation of how destructive tendering is, and then the relationships that we had between the two organisations at the start, that meant we could have quite open and challenging conversations to move us forward. Dean, over to you.
Thanks, Jane. I'd agree with everything that you said. I guess the other point that's worth making, and shouldn't step away from it, is the fact that we had financial pressure. So public health grant cut year on year since 2015. So also part of this was trying to do it differently via Section 75, but at that time realised we needed to take some money out of the agreement because there was no other way of maintaining delivery with the financial pressures we were under. So there were a burning platform in terms of the finances, and the only way we could see of trying to get things moving in the right direction was around changing relationships and the way we work together. And then with a promise that as soon as we were able, with the way the Section 75 works, we'd reinvest as soon as possible, because as a director of public health, there's no way I want to take money out at 0 to 9 teams. If there's any way you want to be investing more, it's in 0 to 5, 0 to 19, best starting well, because that's where ultimately the biggest health gains are, and in terms of the future, where you'll save the health and care system millions and billions nationally moving forward if you get that right in the early stages. So it's absolutely the wrong place to take money from, and absolutely the right place to work together to get the best outcomes.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dean and Bernard. Any other questions or comments, colleagues? Anybody on the call? Those who are not on MS Teams, just shout at me. No, no. If not, can I make a comment or two then as well, please? And that is, I think Dean and Jane have been very honest and very humble, really, about the beginnings of this in relation to the last question. I think what I'd like to praise them for, and I'd like to acknowledge now one of our non-exec directors, Joy Hollister, who was the director working with Dean at the time when this started. I think for me, what this was about was, yes, there's a burning platform. Yes, there's needs, must, and pressures that we have to work under. But I think it epitomizes vision, and it epitomizes leaders who come together with a shared common purpose and a vision that actually creates the solutions then with their staff. And it's really, really important to keep, I think, acknowledging our staff who went through a very difficult journey. It's easy for me to sit here and recount it, but it was painful, I guess, for them individually and for their families. So apologies, they went through that, but equally, they've come through to the other end. And I think for me, driving strategically across partnerships, that vision for a common purpose. And we have seen, haven't we, during COVID-19, how the common enemy of COVID-19 can create such binding common purpose across health and care partners, and where we see some fantastic results. So all to play for, and I hope we do more of this going forward, not only between health and care, Dean, but also across the wider partnerships, across the whole of Joined Up Care Derbyshire. So thank you all. I really appreciate the work that has happened. Any other comments? We have a little bit of time. If anybody's got any more comments or questions. No. Oh, yes, Joy. Welcome.
Thanks, Prem. I posted just a question in the chat, really, and it's a bit broader than just the children's services, but while I'm on, just absolutely well done, everybody. It's great to see the actual outcome of some of that painful work and see the impact that's having on children's services. My question, while we've got Dean on, really, is as we start to think wider than children's services, the public health changes that we're going to see, the inequalities, I just wondered if there's anything now Dean would want to say to us about preparing ourselves for that COVID endemic or post-COVID world where we see more and more of the impact of inequality.
Thanks, Joy. What a question. In terms of healthcare service delivery, we're going to have to think much more holistically around how we promote and deliver services and make them more accessible, and go to greater lengths in order to do that. I've seen some great work from the IMS and VAX team in terms of doing the outreach work around immunisation, vaccinations. There's work we have to do to engage communities and individuals who have previously been tagged as hard to reach. Well, you can argue, I'd argue around the title and the naming of hard to reach, just because a service offer doesn't attract people, doesn't necessarily mean the people themselves are difficult to reach, and there's a lot of research on that. So there's a whole lot of work around services, and that applies equally across health, social care, in terms of how we do that, pathways and access. And then broader than that, there's big questions for what I guess the whole of society and government policymakers to make around how we work around education, around reducing inequalities. It's not right that by virtue of the postcode you're born in, your healthy life expectancy can vary by 15 years depending on where you live in Derbyshire, or the date of your death can vary by 12 years, but depending on where you live in Derbyshire. And it's how you address those big issues, and they are massive issues that are to do with things like living wage, employment practices, education, and right down to how we market and the commercial determinants of health. Lots of different factors that need to be grasped. And COVID has just writ large what in public health and other circles people's talked about for the last 20, 30 years, and now's the time, hopefully, to try to start and do something about it, and recognise these are everybody's problem. They're not health system problems, not council problems. They are whole society issues that by working together we can try and tackle. And in doing that and making things slightly better and keep improving, ultimately you make the funding more sustainable for the whole public sector if you get the model right in the first place. But then again, I would say that's on public health and invest in prevention, because prevention saves us a lot of time on treatment later on.
Thank you, Dean, and a really good question, Joy. We have a comment in the chat box from Poppy, who's raised her hand about those who were left waiting or left services. Poppy.
Hi there. I just wanted to say that as part of the Healthy Family Peer Support Work Service, we've obviously were suspended in March, and we're hearing from the health visitors that they're very much missing us, and it's quite demoralising and frustrating for us to see, you know, the slide with the sustainment and prevalence figures remaining the same pre and before, because that's certainly not the experience that we're hearing from parents. So we appreciate, obviously, there is policies and guidelines and things to go through, but our service was suspended and well over 50% of us were not redeployed. So we spent the last 6 months fighting, being told in kind of the Facebook lives that if you can deliver your service virtually, do. But we've met nothing but barriers, and parents are crying out for peer support and breastfeeding support, and we've not been able to deliver it. And it's really upsetting for us and the mums with brand new babies in a time where they can't get out, that they haven't been able to access us, and particularly for the ones that have accessed us previously.
Frem, would you like me to respond to? Hi, Poppy.
Hi.
Yeah, so I think it is so absolutely acknowledging everything that you're saying and the difficulty of those parents out there. What we've had to look to do is to consider how we shape our services to provide support where we've been able to do it. And certainly in terms of trying to maintain that contact with parents, ensuring that they've got those breastfeeding support contacts through our health visiting service has been key. And hearing all of your frustrations as well, it's certainly something that you know, I know we've been in touch with the service about, and we can pick up separately. But it's not it's to absolutely acknowledge the value that your service brings, whilst trying to consider how we still look to maintain the services for parents in a way that maximises the opportunity for as many as possible.
Thank you, Jane. And I don't know, Poppy, whether you've seen the latest comment from Hannah Edwards, who's praising your service when she had her baby. So well done. I think your concern and challenge is valid. It's important we respond to that. I don't think we profess in DCHS to get absolutely everything right all of the time, because these complexities and challenges keep coming our way. But the solution lies in co-production, want of a better management terminology, about working together, simply about listening and talking. And the solutions usually lie with staff who work in the service. And I know you've demonstrated quite a lot of that already. And we've got new challenges with COVID. And actually, you know, it's a kind of current year challenge, which we'll be talking about more in next year's annual members meeting. So very valid question, Poppy. And I hope, Jane, that can be picked up with staff engagement in how we resolve those issues kind of going forward. Thank you very much. Thank you. So, colleagues, it is just gone 2:25. I feel we should move on to the next bit. But before I do that, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to Jane Needham and to Dean Wallace. Thank you, Dean, for joining us this afternoon. I hope you've appreciated a bit of respite away from COVID-19. But if you need to get back to that, we perfectly understand. But you're welcome to stay as well. Thank you both, and well done. Appreciate it. Thank you. So we move now into the kind of highlights from the Chair and Chief Exec from 1920, which the year 1920, which I must admit feels like a lifetime ago, given everything that we've experienced in the last 6 months. It's been really, really tough on all of our staff and services and the public out there. So there are 3 slides we're going to quickly gallop through to kind of set the scene. I'm going to cover the first 2, and Tracy Allen, our Chief Exec, will cover the 3rd one. So please click away. Thank you. Can you see that, folks? I hope you can. Okay, so I think the first thing to say is just the volume of work that our DCHS colleagues and services are providing, over 2 million contacts in that year, with people cared for in rehabilitation beds, 90,000 of them nearly seen in urgent treatment centres, with a performance of 99.98%, which is really impressive. We've just been talking about children and new babies, 8,300 supported by our health visitors during the last year. 85,000 people cared for at home, more and more prominent as we go forward with our work of providing care closer to home. 3,500 people in our wound clinics. You'll hear more about this kind of newish development, as was the MSK service, with some 17,000+ patients having received services from that. You may have gathered with these backgrounds, and if you haven't, just to remind you that we are rated outstanding by the Care Quality Commission. I should humbly start by saying that this is really, really hard to achieve. And again, thanks to our fantastic staff out there who've helped us achieve this. Without them, we wouldn't achieve this. It's very hard to achieve and very easy to lose. So we need to keep working together to maintain this standing, because I think it is about inspiring confidence in our communities that you're dealing with a good trust overall, well, an outstanding one overall. And you can see the kind of detail on there. We maintained our measures on good and outstanding. They were either good or outstanding. We maintained outstanding for caring, urgent care and dental services from the previous inspection. And what's again fantastic, and Jane was again pivotal, and the whole service was pivotal. Jane as the manager for the service, for the integrated sexual health service, to have moved from requires improvement to outstanding, which is just tremendous, and well done to all of you. Did someone say something then? Did I miss something? No. Okay, I'll keep going because I heard a bit of a noise. I didn't know whether someone was trying to grab my attention. I'll keep going then. So there've been some comings and goings during the year. Just a few examples. Lots going on, but we've had new nursing associates and apprentices that we're working together within the care system. Welcome to all of those. 22 nursing associates in training and 20 in training for apprentices, fantastic, really great performance. And, you know, sad to see the departure of our day case services, which is like planned care services that used to take place at Ilkeston Hospital and so on. The services are still there, but the colleagues and the management arrangements, if you like, have been transferred to the Derby Hospital Group, and our community dental services, sad loss to us, have moved after a tender by commissioners, and that was not Derbyshire commissioners, it was NHSE commissioners, to another service. Welcome to our new colleagues who've joined us, and au revoir and best wishes to those who have left. Click on to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. On the left-hand side of this slide, I really think it's important for us to pause and acknowledge a huge amount of work that's going on in what I call building the legacy of services for future generations to come in Derbyshire. We're really privileged in DCHS that our staff have spent the past 5-7 years working really hard to make savings, to make efficiencies. And therefore, we are in a privileged position to be able to spend that money on developing facilities for the future. And there's work going on in Belper, Bakewell and Buxton. There's improved wound care services in Ilkeston. There's ongoing work that you may have noticed if you drive past at Walton Hospital. A fantastic work that's taken place. The next two examples are work contributed and finances contributed by our fantastic leagues of friends in Ripley and in Matlock, with the Ripley Community Hospital Physiotherapy Unit, and with at Matlock the continued support, the Matlock League of Friends, with continued contribution towards parking spaces, as well as a new ultrasound machine. Thank you again to our great leagues of friends. We wouldn't be anywhere without them, with their contribution. So really appreciate it. We've completed refurbishments at Ilkeston and massive technological advancements and investments. Stacey, fingers crossed that the technology continues to work for the rest of the afternoon. It seems to be doing so far. So let's keep going, folks. I've already touched on our leagues of friends, but you know, I want to take the opportunity to thank our fabulous volunteers up and down the whole of Derbyshire, really, both in our community hospitals and in the community, who give up selflessly their time and community spirit to support patients and our staff, to fundraise, to invest, as we've already said. We are incredibly grateful to them. The health and care sector would be poorer were it not for the contribution of volunteers, not only within Derbyshire, but may I say also nationally. We've seen, haven't we, during COVID-19, a massive step up in volunteers wanting to help the NHS. And I think that says an awful lot about the spirit of the British people. And I think it says an awful lot about the affection that they hold dear in their hearts for the NHS. And to each and every one of you, thank you. Special mention, if I may, to the Duke and Duchess of Derbyshire, who remain our close friends and allies and patrons of Whitworth League of Friends. And not to forget, and it's very easy while we're going through, of course, we are going through COVID-19 and things seem to be ramping up again. It started on the 11th of March, and I'm afraid we're in this for the long haul, and we have to work together to tackle this horrible pandemic disease that only working together will help us. I'll take the opportunity to just say that there's been a launch of an app today on NHS COVID-19 app, so please download it. It's really helpful, I think, in terms of tracking and getting advice and so on. So we've had that started during 2019, 2020. We've had a flood and a pandemic, thankfully not a famine. So we've had floods. So with Whaley Bridge, big risk around a dam bursting. You recall that in August 2019. huge efforts from our colleagues who kind of risk their lives going to the front line, helping to access people in need in that area. Tracy just posted, we've had a famine of loo rolls. I like that, Tracy. Of course we have had a famine. I think it's coming back into the picture, isn't it, Tracy, as well, as we speak. That'll be really worrying. And at Babington, and, you know, again, with floods and how our, you know, usually our unsung heroes behind the scenes are IFM and estates colleagues who often don't get mentioned in these things, who work brilliantly, and I know throughout the night, to help our staff and our patients evacuate swiftly to a safer place, and then reopen the ward 11 days later after a major cleanup. And to the colleagues in Whaley Bridge and Babington and our estate staff, huge thanks from this board for the excellent work you've done in those very difficult and challenging times. We'll speak more about COVID-19, I'm sure, and there'll be a bit more on this later when Tracy does her forward look. But for now, over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Prem. So I think Prem kicked off the afternoon by just talking about some of the things that characterise the services that we provide, about how we really strive to make them very person-centred, make them joined up with other parts of the health and social care system, and working across boundaries. And I think this slide, reflecting on some of the service developments that we achieved during 2019-20, just brings that really to life. In terms of integrating and joining up, we've already had the best example I think we could have done with Jane and Dean sharing the amazing work of our children's services teams working across organisations out into the community. But last year had several others, so it was the first year that we ran with partners, local authorities and other NHS organisations, a health and social care apprenticeship scheme, and that was about creating new roles and an integrated training programme to develop people's skills and experience, both in providing care within the health service and also within the care sector. Huge pressure on both of those areas into this year, and so we're in a fantastic position. We had the first 10 graduates from 2019-20 who've all been employed within health and social care in Derbyshire, and we've got another 20 people going through that programme this year. Again, with adult care, supporting people to be able to stay at home, maintain their independence, and then supporting them to get back out of hospital if they do need to go into hospital is a major priority for our integrated community services. And last year saw lots of progress on exactly the type of joint work that Jane was describing, but with our local authority partners in the county and in Derby City, to actually join up the teams that support people, usually older people, maintain and then regain their health and independence as they face physical health problems related to their ageing and frailty, etc. And like children's services, our integrated teams in Derby City were up for national awards last year. Some of the other areas in which we've been developing and working across boundaries relate to wound care, and Prem's already referenced that, and I know Michelle might want to talk about it a bit more in a minute, but we work differently with primary care during 2019-20 to set up and establish wound care clinics that meant that we could take all of those patients that had wounds that needed specialist input and manage that in a personalised, really effective way, making sure that we were introducing clinical best practice, developing specialist skills that we could share across the county and the city. And you'll see there really fantastic improvements in the rates at which wounds have been healing since that new service model was established. And that's fantastic for people themselves with those wounds. There's almost nothing as debilitating, as painful leg ulcers, etc. But it also meant that we've made better use of our respective skills in primary care and in community nursing, and significant reductions in the costs of dressings, drugs, etc. associated with those wounds. And then the final example that I wanted to pick up was around working our MSK physiotherapists working again in a joined up cross-organisational way with general practice, with orthopaedic surgeons, with GP specialists in MSK, to ensure that everybody who has an MSK problem in the city and the county can actually get referred very quickly through to a specialist team who can triage them and make sure that they get as quickly as possible to the most appropriate service. That might be orthopaedics to be worked up for a joint replacement. It might be into an exercise program to help them manage knee pain before they need a joint replacement. It might be pain service. That was established the year before last. It's continued to develop during 1920, and we're working again with system partners to take that forward this year. I think they characterise those criteria, Prem, about joined up person-centred care. And I'm going to hand back to you now so that we can hear a bit more from our exec director teams about the underpinning work around our people, our quality systems and structures, and the way in which we've used our money to support and enable these great service developments to happen.
Thank you, Tracy. And if we were meeting in person, you would probably, we would have copies of the annual report and accounts available, but fret not, it is available on our website to all of you on the call and to members of the public. If you require hard copy, please get in touch with our communications team and we can make that available. As Tracy said, we now move into the kind of statutory bit about delivering, if you like, accountable to our public, the annual accounts report as well as the quality report. And the way we kind of organize that in DCHS is around quality services and quality people and quality business. Starting then with quality services, may I welcome Michelle and Ben.
Thank you, Prem, and good afternoon to everyone. In terms of the quality of our services, I'd like to offer that 2019-20 has been a good year for the Trust, and this has been highlighted by the presentation thus far. There will be further information available in terms of the quality of our services in the annual Trust Quality Report, which will be due to be published later this year. However, the year hasn't been without its challenges. We continue to be challenged with increasing patient numbers and pressures on our resources, and therefore it becomes ever more important that we have a strong focus on quality assurance and continuous quality improvement and innovation. We continue to work really hard to recruit and retain our staff, and a particular pressure point is the retention of community nursing staff within Derby City. And this is leading to us having to think creatively about how we recruit, how we deploy, and how we retain our workforce. And this is some of the work that Tracy alluded to when we talk about apprentices, nurse associates, how we use our volunteers, and how we give people work experience within health services to make them think and consider a future with us. The community nursing-led wound care clinics across the county have generally worked well. But again, because of the challenges of recruitment, there has been an impact on mobilising the service in Derby City. In addition, it has been unfortunate that we've had to report 2 never events. Both of these resulted in minimum harm to our patients and have led to us making changes that ensure that these would not reoccur. However, there are 3 particularly positive aspects to highlight. The first one being the achievement of over 80% of our staff having the flu vaccination. This was a significant improvement on the previous year and one we intend to surpass this year. In addition, utilising our Quality Always clinical assessment and accreditation scheme, we are extremely pleased to report that we have no clinical teams classified as having serious concerns about the quality and safety of the care they deliver to our patients. And finally, over 98% of the 22,500 people surveyed who use our services said that they would recommend the Trust to families and friends.
Thank you, Michelle. I'd just like to tell everyone about a couple of important and positive new developments. So DCHS runs 4 urgent treatment centres. They're all now formally designated as such, and they've met all 27 national standards for accreditation. One of the requirements is to be GP-led. So I'm very pleased to say a business case was approved in August to recruit community general practitioners. This is to provide senior clinical leadership for the UTCs and to support our wards, community teams and non-medical prescriber training. Interviews were held on the 21st of September this week, and 5 excellent GPs have accepted part-time posts with us. There's been an additional investment for developing advanced clinical practitioners. That's also been approved this summer. This will boost our ability to step up care in the community and try and avoid hospital attendances. Finally, we've been working very hard with system partners and have agreed hospital discharge, reablement and admission avoidance pathways of care across the whole county. Thank you.
Is that it, Michelle and Ben? Thank you very much. We've just had a question posted. We're going to come back to Q&A later on, but Michelle, could I ask you to just note the question from Lindsay Cliff, and can we come back to that in the Q&A
Yes, of course,
later on, rather than us get through the presentations, and we'll have time. Lindsay will come back to that. And may I ask other executive directors, once you finish your bit, please look out in the chat box if there are any questions that have been posted for your particular bit, and let's come back to those. I'll try and remember them as well. Over now then to Darren Tidmarsh on quality people.
Thanks, Prem. So Darren Tidmarsh, new Director of People Services and Organisational Excellence. Only 3 weeks in, so I feel a little bit guilty in reflecting all the positive developments in 1920, because obviously I can't take any credit for all the good work that has been undertaken. I'm going to start my my quality report by reflecting on some of the findings from the 2019 National NHS Staff Survey, because in my first few weeks, it's been really clear to me that this is an organisation that really does listen to its staff. I've heard leaders and managers use terms like listening to my teams and my teams tell me. And the staff survey gives us lots of really important feedback. So the first thing is that nearly a third of our staff took time to reflect on their working life at DCHS in completing the survey. And the results showed us that in 9 out of the 11 survey themes, we showed improvement, including areas around quality of care and safety culture. And the two other ones, we remain unchanged in our performance and remain above national benchmarks and peer groups. The 2 questions that we use to get us a kind of sense of the temperature of the organisation and how colleagues would either recommend DCHS as a provider of care or as a place of work, both also improved in 1920. Particularly pleasing to see that there was an increase in areas where there was particular focus of improvement, and the one that I'd like to pick out is health and well-being, with the number of staff who were reporting that they felt that the trust took and valued their health and well-being as part of their work. And I don't think we've ever seen a more important time in the first 6 months that's been important, where we've had to make sure that all of our staff have had a COVID risk assessment and that we've had to take particular care of our vulnerable staff. And going forward, we'll have to make sure that we consider the health, safety and well-being in all one-to-one touch points with staff and their line managers. The findings from the recent pulse surveys have showed that we've been doing a good job on this, and teams and we put some additional support in to help managers lead teams in a virtual environment. We've also, during 1920, we continued our work around embedding our commitment to inclusion. We supported our staff networks and took the findings from the RES and the WDES standards to inform our work, increasing our representation of BAME staff. But we do need to do some work on understanding why some of our BAME applicants are not appointed after shortlisting. Our vacancy rate concluded around just over 5%, but there is specific variation across professional groups, teams, and in localities, particular pressure in community nursing within the Derby City area. Both Tracy and Michelle have referred to some of the work that we're doing going forward to try and address this. It is clear that our people agenda remains broad and significant, and a very important one as we move through 2021. Thank you.
Thank you, Darren. I think we're moving on now to quality business and the annual accounts. Chris Sands.
Thanks, Prem. So I'm Chris Sands, Director of Finance and Strategy and Deputy Chief Executive. So it's my pleasure to report the financial results for 2019 and 20. I think the good news is we met all of our financial duties as an organisation in. We delivered an underlying surplus of about £2 million, which enabled us to draw down additional provider sustainability funding of £2 million from the Department of Health. To get us to that position, we delivered efficiencies of around 5.6 million. And I'd just like to thank all our staff for, again, looking after the trust finances, the same as they would look after their own money. By having these strong financial results, it just does allow us then to invest in our equipment and invest in our buildings. And Prem mentioned earlier some of the things that we've done as an organisation. When we submit annual accounts, we need to make sure that the information that we're providing is true and fair. So what we have is a process whereby our external auditors come in and review the financial results that we are reporting. Just got a bit of feedback at the moment. So
yeah, Chris, thank you. Sorry about that. There's some feedback. I'll keep hearing. Can you please make sure you're on mute when you let Chris through his presentation? Thank you.
Thanks, Prem. So I was talking about the financial results. So our external auditors have reviewed our position, and they have given us what's called an unmodified audit opinion, which essentially means they've given us a clean bill of health, and the figures within the annual accounts are a true and fair view. Thank you for whoever's muted, that's a big help. In terms of some of the other areas that we've looked at from a quality business, we've mentioned some of the capital spending previously. We also have a focus around information. And one of the key risk areas that the board interested in is around cyber security. So the slide just shows some of the things that we've done around cyber security this year. But again, one of the big things we have done is significantly upgraded our equipment, which we've been able to do through our capital programme. So looking forward, we will start to understand what finances we're getting for the second half of 2020-21. So we're working with system partners. We received those allocations last week, so we're looking at that. and we're preparing for that. But we're also starting to think about, again, some of the learning from the last 6 months that we've been through, some of the things that we'll need to do as we move to an integrated care system in Derbyshire. So that the finance directors across Derbyshire started to look at what those financial flows will need to look like in the future, with the aim of how we make best use of the Derbyshire pound going forward. So that's me done, Prem.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you to all three executive presentations. Some huge achievements there, not to be underestimated. Again, supported by our staff throughout the organisation. Well done to you all. We move swiftly on to the lead governance report. Now, I understand that Bernard is in Devon and having some technical difficulties. And so we have Lynn Walsh. We've got another echo going on. Someone's unmuted themselves. Please mute yourselves if you're not speaking. And Lynn Walsh, our deputy lead governor, is going to ably step in. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Prem. I can just keep hearing an echo still. Okay, thank you, everybody. My name is Lynn Walshaw, and I'm the Deputy Lead Governor at DCHS. And I just want 5 minutes really to walk through the Lead Governor report. You can see from the slide, try to represent the complexity of what the NHS looks like. Lots of cogs, a huge machine.
Lynn, sorry, Lynn, it's Prem here. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You've still got terrible echo going on, which is not fair on you. I'm gonna ask Mel or Rob to mute everyone. Apologies, but it's a step we have to take because it's not fair on presenters because it's hard to hear. So can we mute all, please?
Yeah, Prem, I'll do that. Okay, shall we try again? Is that better? I think that's better. I can't hear an echo now.
Yeah, keep going, Lynn.
Can everybody hear okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. So good, right, thank you. Okay, so yeah, so the slide really represents the huge machine that the NHS is, and really whereas the Council of Governors, we actually fit into that and what we actually contribute to some of that. And again, I think it's just to reinforce that as a Council of Governors, we're there to represent the people that have elected us across our constituencies. And in fulfilling some of that statutory role, we work closely with the board, we work with the executive directors and the non-executive directors, and we aim to provide that balance really and a voice related to all of the workings that occur across the trust. And you will perhaps hear us say sometimes when people ask what it is we do and what we're there for, that we sometimes describe ourselves as being the eyes and the ears for the people that we serve across our constituencies. So if you can move on to the next slide. I'll keep talking. The context of healthcare, as we know, is really complex and it presents many challenges, both nationally and across Derbyshire. And within that, DCHS is no exception, really. We know and we note there's a rise in demand, there's a greater emphasis on system working, and the pandemic's brought into sharp focus many processes, highlighting things that work, things that don't work, but it's also brought about a lot of innovative changes and developments as well. And I think our role as governors is to continue throughout all of that change, to act as a critical friend, working in partnership with the trust. As you'll see from the slide, it is a complex process, but we're always there alongside what those processes are sort of developing as. So if we move to the next slide. we're always asking ourselves as governors, are we tuned in to the organisation? Are we tuned into the trust? And I think we all genuinely believe, yes, we are. We not only see what happens, we hear what happens across the organisation, and we take an active role in actually looking and understanding around all of the changes and developments that go on. For example, we actually undertake some of the insight visits where we can actually have an opportunity to go and speak to teams, to speak to patients and carers, and more recently moving to a virtual approach, so we're not losing that connectivity and that connection to get a sense of what's happening across the organisation. We continue to sort of have conversations across both public and staff governors, and we hold our constituency meetings with PREM, and there's often robust conversations and challenges that come out of those discussions. And we work more widely across the sort of regional groups as well. We're linked into the Joined Up Care Derbyshire, we work with our local commissioners, and obviously we talk to CQC as well. So we're actively involved in quite a broad spectrum of sort of conversations around what's happening across our local healthcare. So we move on to the next slide. We're looking at sort of reflecting really on what has the role of governors been, what would we pick out as some of the key outstanding sort of points throughout the year. And we've heard some fantastic feedback today, and that's only a very small amount of what we see as governors being undertaken across the trust. So I think, you know, the list sort of highlights a small number really of some of the good things that we hear, we see. It would be remiss of us to not mention here again that we're an outstanding organisation. And I think, as people have mentioned throughout all of the presentations today, as a governor, we constantly see that patient focus. It's very much patient-centred care, but there's also a huge element of actually staff support, staff development, all of which goes together to actually make the organisation much more able to respond and be innovative and you know, sort of completely embrace the new ways of working really that is constantly evolving through the NHS. And I think it's good to see the organisation continues to be a learning organisation. As governors, we constantly see the lessons learned, new innovations, constant conversations around things that could be different, getting feedback from patients, from carers, from the staff, and being able to actively test and challenge and try out new systems of working, which is all really, really good. And I think at this point, it's well worth mentioning that because of the processes and systems that are in place across DCHS already, DCHS, from a governor's perspective, was well able to actually address the challenges that the COVID pandemic has brought. So I think there's got to be a point of recognition there around there was a robust system in place which has actually made some of the challenges a bit more bearable, I think, to actually manage. So looking to the future, I think for all of us, it's fair to say there are a huge amount of uncertainties. There's going to be challenges and there's going to be lots of change. And I think it's going to be difficult to actually try and understand what the new normal is going to look like. And I think as governors, we've got a role to play in actually trying to understand what that new normal will look like. We will continue to work collaboratively and innovatively. And again, looking at the lessons learned across the organisation from what the pandemic has brought. We're seeing already a greater use of digital platforms and virtual media. And as governors, I think although we have to socially be slightly distant from everybody, we are still there and connected virtually. And I think we will see more of that work coming forward as we move through the next few months. And I think that rings a point really of making sure that the governor's voice is still heard. And I think being able to use that virtual platform is a really good way of actually staying connected across the services that are being developed across DCHS. As governors, we play our role across our communities and we do our hands, face and space speech to people, whether that's family, friends, contacts. I think it's just our role as part of maintaining some of that message. And I think, as Captain Tom has said quite eloquently more recently, that tomorrow will be a better day. And I think really that's what we all feel. There's a huge amount of optimism across what DCHS does. We hear and see some amazing, innovative, collaborative work. And as governors, we're happy to actually be there to actually support what the Trust is doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn, and an excellent report from both, presented brilliantly by yourself, Lynn, and I know you and Bernard have worked really closely on this behind the scenes. Thank you to Bernard as well. So, and thank you for your kind words about our organisation. You play a very important role whilst remaining physically distanced but socially connected. So well done and thank you. Tracy, tell us about how the year is shaping up and what we've got to look forward to.
Okay, well, of course, it's always odd reflecting back on last year when we're already halfway through the current year. I think the one thing that we can all agree is that 2020-21 has not been the year we might have expected. And it really has all been about our response to the global pandemic and ensuring that we were in the very best shape possible to support our communities in that initial response after lockdown. So if we can just have the next slide, Rob. I think you'll see when I go through some of the items in that infographic, the first 6 months of this year have posed huge challenges, and actually the second 6 months are going to be posing equally huge challenges. But what I am immensely proud of and grateful for is the magnificent response from absolutely everybody who works for DCHS. It's a response that has been characterised by adaptability, innovation, teamwork, kindness and support, and absolutely reflected the values of the organisation that we've prided ourselves on and that the CQC recognised when they came to review us last year. I think we've had a twin track approach, prioritising looking after our patients, but recognising that we won't be able to do that unless we equally prioritise looking after each other. And I'll talk a little bit more about the fantastic work that our Resolve and wellbeing teams have done to support all of us through what has been a very difficult first 6 months. I think the key message that I'd want to make, and it came out very clearly from Jane's presentation, is that despite some messages in the national media to the contrary, the NHS has absolutely remained open. We did temporarily stop some routine care. We were required to do that as part of a national framework. Poppy, we've already had a discussion with Poppy about the impact on some of our colleagues and services around that. The thing I'd want to emphasise is that we've actually been busier than ever and have maintained contact with absolutely everybody who has needed urgent care. You'll see there that our teams have been supporting more than 550,000 visits in the first part of the year. So we've absolutely remained open for business and providing valuable support to really vulnerable people right across the community. Now that's needed everybody in DCHS to really rapidly develop new ways of working, to face up and sort out challenges that we never had imagined or planned for. So you can see there that we had to set up a distribution network for personal protective equipment and get more than 2.5 million bits of PPE out to more than 130 locations and into the backs of cars of our district nurses, our OTs, our physiotherapists, health visitors, etc. So huge adaptation and innovation, developed infection prevention control processes, standard operating procedures, got that PPE distribution network up and running. And our clinical teams and non-clinical support teams worked through really quickly how they could work differently to provide the same services but in different ways. So as Lynn just reflected, we've seen a massive increase in the use of virtual consultations, supporting people either by telephone phone or increasingly by video to be able to get them the care that they needed. Who knew that our MSK physios could actually do assessment and treatment programs? In one example, with a farmer who balanced his phone on the bonnet of his Land Rover while he was out in the field and did a full MSK assessment and diagnostic process remotely. So huge innovation in looking at new ways of working. And we needed about 10% of us, that 400 people down in the bottom corner, to be redeployed. Our PPE systems, our infection prevention control, new cleaning schedules, etc., needed more staff in some traditional roles, cleaning, etc., and some staff in completely new roles, managing a whole PPE distribution centre. So enormously grateful, not just to the people who carried on doing their jobs in different ways, but to the many colleagues who stepped up and volunteered to go into completely new environments and muck in to provide the support that was required. So throughout all of this, we've had a theme going on about supporting the practical welfare of colleagues right across DCHS and their physical and emotional well-being. Lots of challenges about people having to work remotely. Almost overnight, the vast majority of us who were office-based moved to be working from home. That needed a huge amount of technical support from our fantastic IT colleagues. We needed to think about how to support those of us who were now working from home, possibly with other people working in the same home, possibly with children that we were meant to be homeschooling at the same time. So that required lots of work around how to support people's mental and physical well-being. And at the same time, practical things like at the very beginning of lockdown, when most retail outlets were shut, we were very aware of the fact that colleagues who were out and about crisscrossing the county and the city had far fewer opportunities to get the food and drink that they needed to keep themselves going during their shifts. So put in place a logistics programme that actually got free food and drink across to staff, not just DCHS staff actually, but general practice staff, some local authority staff. We had a whole hub and spoke network going on to provide food. So a huge operation, and at the heart of it, it has required real kindness and compassion, both to the communities that we're working with, but as I've said, to each other, who, no matter where we are, what our family circumstances have been, what our professional role has been, have faced completely unparalleled anxieties, stresses and new challenges. And I think I'm very, very proud of the effort we've put into supporting each other through this. And that, I think, characterises what we're all about and will be a critical part of carrying on into the next part of the year. So a big thank you from me to all of our fantastic colleagues. But we also wanted to take a minute to recognise the amazing support that we've had from the broader community during the first half of the year. That's ranged from people coming to clap and beep horns at some of our sites every week while that was going on, but also huge amounts of donations of food, of self-care, hand sanitizers, etc., wobble boxes, deodorants, wipes for people who couldn't get home, all manner of things. I feel as though the way in which we've been able to respond, and the rest of the NHS has been able to respond, has been at least, it's been driven by the brilliant staff that we've got in DCHS, but it has really, really been enhanced and underpinned by that community support. So we'd just like to say a bit of a thank you to the broader community.
No sound, Rob. Rob, can you restart? There's no sound on there.
Still no sound.
Oh, such a shame.
Rachel, do you want me to? I can try. Bear with
Please,
me.
Rob.
I'll have a go. Just a sec.
Just bear with us, please, colleagues.
Hello, my name's Michelle, Chief Nurse at Derbyshire Community Health Services. At what has been a really difficult time for so many people, I'd like to thank you for staying home, protecting the NHS and saving lives.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Shishini.
Abungan. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Dziękujemy bardzo.
Thank you. Thank you.
And a big thank you from me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for supporting my mummy.
I just wanted to say a huge thank you to all organisations, companies, volunteers who sent us donations, who sent us food, who helped us out with access to hotels, guest houses, been making PPE, you name it, you've done it. It's been absolutely fantastic. We wouldn't have done it without you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say a massive thank you to the millions of key workers, from refuse collectors, the police, teachers, the postal service and volunteers who have kept the NHS and this country going. Thank you, and in Malay, Terima kasih, and in Punjabi, Tuada Dhanyawad.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Dode.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you so much to everyone.
I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all the children, partners, wider family and friends who've been supporting my fantastic NHS colleagues and getting them through the last few months, making sure that they were able to support the rest of us and keep us safe. Even the furry friends on 4 legs, not 2, that I know have made a great big difference to how it's felt to get home after a long day working in the NHS. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Asante sana. Bye bye danke.
Namba.
Shukriya.
Thank you. Shukriya.
Salamat.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Midnight says thank you too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
he's done.
Happy birthday, NHS.
Thanks, Rob. Got it working in the end. So if we just think about the next 6 months, it's all about that service recovery, and we've got a triple set of priorities around recovering the backlogs that we've built up over the last 6 months and ensuring that we're there for everybody that needs us for the next 6. Managing the normal increases in demand that we see over the winter. And of course, maintaining our ability to adapt and flex to manage the implications of increases in COVID-19 transmission and requirements and pressure on the NHS. And that's something that we're very concerned about at the moment. It's going to be require that same adaptability and flexibility, and we're going to be building on the innovation we've already seen, maintaining that ability to see people remotely and support them via the phone and the video. You'll see the pictures there of our drive-through immunisation clinics that have been a fantastic example of learning to work in different ways. And we didn't get everything right in the first initial response. You know, Poppy's question highlighted the fact that we didn't always manage to get the perfect match between our skills and experience and where the demand was at any particular point in the pandemic. But what we have got is a huge amount of learning from that first 6 months. We've worked right across the trust to capture as many people's experiences as possible, and I think that puts us in a really strong position for the rest of this year. There's 2 key foundations to the way in which we're going to work over the next 6 months, and they're there. The first one is about keeping people safe, both our patients and all of us, maintaining the very best infection prevention control practice that we can, and also ensuring that we achieve the very highest rates of flu vaccinations for our NHS and social care workforce, and also achieve the highest vaccinations in the community for the eligible vulnerable people in the community that we can. And Michelle's already set out our aspirations there. And then the second foundation is I've mentioned about continuing to support each other's health and well-being. I think this year is the year that it's a gift that just keeps giving, isn't it, coronavirus? And there's no doubt that people are tired. The adrenaline is gone from the initial response. Life outside of work remains uncertain and anxious, anxiety inducing. We're all facing different pressures. It's going to be more important than ever that we continue to invest in and prioritise the time that we spend and the support and expertise that we've got available to support all of us as we continue to make the difference that we want to make across Derbyshire. So the final bit of this year, wanted to make the point that as well as tactically getting on with the service delivery today, tomorrow, next month, we're doing 2 other things for the rest of this year. We're continuing to build for the future. There's great pictures there of the new development that we're planning in Belper on the Babington Hospital site. Next week, we'll be moving to support people in the new Ada Belfield site in Belper that Derbyshire County Council have built. So we are continuing to work on the longer term developments around the facilities that we'll need across Derbyshire and Derby City, the services that we'll need in the longer term. The other thing that we're doing this year, and we want to continue to build on, picks up on some of Dean's messages from the beginning of the meeting. There's no doubt that coronavirus has, well Dean said it's ripping right through the health inequalities, the general inequalities that already existed in our society, and it's making them much worse. People right across Derby and Derbyshire are facing quite a bleak future. In terms of increasing poverty, unemployment, and the impacts on their health that will have. We can tackle that in 2 ways, by providing the very best health services that we can. We're doing a pretty good job and we remain committed to that. But we can make a bigger contribution to the wider community recovery if we think about how we use the £190 million a year that we spend. So there's 2 particular areas that we're wanting to look at the rest of this year. One is who we employ. We're out to recruit new staff in lots of different areas, and we've got a particular priority that we've set ourselves for the rest of this year and into next year to look at how we can create roles for local people, young people in Derbyshire who may not now be in employment. So things like building on the health and social care apprenticeship scheme that we've already got running. We want to make a bigger difference there. We're a major employer and we should be able to contribute to the broader economic recovery. And the second bit is where we spend our money. The vast majority of our money gets spent on staff, but we also buy a lot of goods, we buy a lot of services, and so we're setting ourselves a specific target to increase the amount of money that we spend with Derbyshire companies, again, to try and enhance and maximise the contribution we can make to the broader economic recovery in Derbyshire, and right round to where we started the afternoon, supporting more and more children and young people in Derbyshire to grow up in happy, stable, healthy homes. Last slide then, I think, so next year's AMM will be a much more detailed look at how we've done against those challenges, how the second half of the year shaped up. But it has been an unprecedented year already, and I think we've seen the amazing response that we've all made. We would like to do something slightly different to present back at the AGM next year, which is a kind of virtual scrapbook of experiences and stories from patients that we've supported, from staff within the organisation, and from the many different parts of the community who we work with across Derby and Derbyshire. We've started to build it already, and you'll see there that we're collecting a sort of interactive scrapbook of different people's experiences, perspectives, insights, and achievements this year. And we'd really love for as many people as possible on this call, your family, friends, your colleagues, to get in on the act and to participate and contribute so that we've got as comprehensive a scrapbook for next year and in perpetuity to remind us all of just what an extraordinary year 2020 has been. Thanks, Prem.
Thank you very much, Tracy. That is fantastic. Brings us to the end of the presentation. So let's open it up for any questions. We have a fit. Sorry, we're running a little bit late. Technical glitches has meant we've lost a little bit of time. So I'll shut up and invite questions. Anybody? None. No hands up. We have a hand up. Let me just see. So I can't see. I'm sorry. I thought we had a hand up. Was that you, Lance?
We do, Prem. Lance.
Yes. Welcome, Lance. You're on mute, I think.
Thank you very much. I was just saying it's a long time since we last met in Buxton, where you used to move the meetings around the area.
All right.
Yeah, I think, as you know, Lance Dowson, I'm a High Peak Borough Council, New Mills Town Councillor, and I'm one of the public governors for Stepney Hospital. Some information that came to me last week, and your public governors might be concerned about this, and I'm not really sure where the link is because in our area we're covered by 3 different trusts. But I was informed that the breast cancer screening, the mobile unit, was being removed from Whaley Bridge, Buxton and New Mills. When I checked up, they said that it was because the unit was COVID okay, but the clinics next to where they would have been was not COVID okay. Now, I know that from I can gather, the mobile units come out of Chesterfield Royal, but the clinic and the urgent treatment centre in New Mills, where it was next to, as far as I'm aware, that must be COVID secure because it's in daily use. So it's just a question, really, if somebody could, does anybody know about this loss of the mobile screening unit, or can they confirm that the urgent treatment centre and the clinic in New Mills is COVID secure and is in use and is safe for staff and patients to use?
Is that something, Tracy, you want to pick up, or Will?
Hi, Prem. Hi, Lance. Yeah, Will Jones here, Chief Operating Officer. I'm not aware of Chesterfield Royal having withdrawn the mobile screening unit, but I will certainly make inquiries. But I can assure you that New Mills Clinic, which is a DCHS building, is in use, and the Urgent Treatment Centre is a service that is provided by Derbyshire Health United, and we provide them with accommodation, and that's certainly been operating. So if Mel could and the team could make sure, I'm sure they'll be able to provide me with your email address, Lance, and I will get in touch with my opposite number at Chesterfield Royal and see what's going on.
Appreciate that very much. Thank you very much. The email address is straight in my name, lancedowson@hotmail.com. It's a lot less official than my official ones and a lot easier to get into.
That's great. Everybody's got that now, Lance. Thank you. Will be in touch, I'm sure. Any other questions or comments from anybody? You've been awfully quiet today. No more? Okay. I think we've kept you long enough. So I think all that's left for me to do, colleagues, is to bring our proceedings to a close by simply thanking a number of people, if I may. First of all, thanks to our comms team and others behind the scenes, and Mel and colleagues who've put so much effort into preparing for this, and our directors. Well done, because it was a mammoth effort to get this done, and despite one or two small glitches, I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's kind of gone really well. At one stage, I noticed we had 115 people dialed in. That's the biggest number we've ever had on an AMM. And whilst I think we missed that personal contact and have a cup of tea and have a chat and all that, I think there's also some benefits in this, because people have been able to come in and out and to get traction with so many people. I think it is really positive. So thank you to my executive colleagues. Thank you to the whole board, without whom we won't be here. Thank you to our 4,500 staff out there. We said it a number of times, and we mean it. Without them, we wouldn't be here. Thank you to our Council of Governors as representatives of our communities who keep us on our toes, but also massive supporters of DCHS. We've seen a fantastic, heart-rendering, lots of love video, haven't we, about our public, from our staff, but also from our public during COVID-19. Thank you to all of our public and supporters and our communities, because this is the way we're going to get through it. To our volunteers, to our partners, to all of you on this call, thank you very much. That brings our proceedings to a close. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Great to see you. Well done.
Thank you all. Have a good weekend. You've earned it.